All right. Welcome to my introduction to Bowline. I'll talk more about what Bowline is later, but first of all, my name is David Numan. I'm a senior developer at Civic Actions. I live in Hamilton with my wife and 2-year-old daughter.
Cool.
And I've been doing Drupal for about seven or 8 years. And lately I've been particularly interested in DevOps. There's often DevOps tracks at conferences and so on. And I've been diving into that as much as I can. In my spare time, I pretend to have a woodworking hobby, which will come up soon. And I also just really love Linux. I've been using Linux for probably 16 years. Right now I'm using Arch Linux, and if anybody's curious, I'm using Xmon as my window manager. So here we go. I have about 16 slides. I think I removed about as many as that, so I hope this will be true. Also, I might, because I've been really living in Docker for a while, so if I'm glossing over assumptions, please stop and ask me clarification questions. But if you have bigger questions, please save them for the end. All right, so I'm going to be talking about Docker and running Drupal in Docker. Just to kind of introduce this, I've been thinking a lot about developer experience. We talk a lot about UX, user experience, in web development, software development. And I guess in the DevOps world, I'm thinking about, I think a lot about our teams and their experience as a developer creating a website. I don't know if this is a term or not. I haven't quite researched it. I think it might be, but I think developer experience has a lot to do with the tools we use while they're working, and just the sort of ecosystem of all of that. And to bring in my woodworking hobby, I actually enjoy traditional woodworking. So here we have two different tools that do a very similar task. It's flattening and smoothing a board. One is a power tool, and the other is a hand tool. And I prefer the hand tool because it's not my profession, perhaps, and I can take it once I want to. But I also find it's really enjoyable to use a hand plane. It's a very different experience. Instead of just feeding the board in, you're working with the wood. You can start using it right away. You don't have to spend time gearing things up and everything like that. And it's just sort of a different frame of mind. So the tool, in this example, the tools really shape the experience. And something that I've heard a lot in the DevOps conversations is that the tools don't matter, it's about the culture. But I think, actually, the tools matter quite a lot. So, to pose the question, what would be a positive developer experience? What are sort of some of the key ingredients to that? And I think, well, I would love to hear if anybody has ideas about it, just shout out something. But if you're thinking of what is a great part or a great ingredient in working on a Drupal project, what might that be? Drupal commerce?
As an ingredient?
Yeah, so I'm talking really high level, I guess. And in my example here, I was talking about the hand plane. I can grab the plane and start using it right away. That's something I also value as a software developer. I want to get going right away in a project. So that startup time, really high level.
Like a distro?
Command line tools.
Drush.
I think one of the big reasons we use Drupal is a lot more, right? Basically, our velocity is increased dramatically when we use it.
Right.
You know, that's one of the things I really love about Drupal because it allows us to do things that we do so much otherwise. Because we still don't have time to use it.
Right.
Build ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So using a powerful tool that can do so much, very flexible, right? You can meet a lot of different needs. So Drupal itself is part of that. These are some of the things that I was thinking about. I already mentioned minimal ramp-up time. So if I'm going to start a new Drupal project, either maybe I'm joining a team that's already working on a project in my company or something like that, or we're bringing on a new client. As a developer, I want to get going right away. Another part, I think, of a developer experience is context switching. How many times you're working on a project and then another client all of a sudden grabs your attention. You have to switch to work on something else for a half a day or so. Yeah, so that can. I think that to have a smooth context switching is a really important piece of developer experience. Another thing is learnable patterns. To have the tools are somehow discoverable, like working like with the administration menu. Like, are you able to find things quickly in a sort of logical, predictable way? And I think the last one is interesting and I think important is mastery. That is, and this one it goes to my woodworking example as well, I think. Feeding some lumber into the power tool planer, I don't feel like you can gain a lot of mastery with that, but using a hand tool, a hand plane, you can just continually get better and better at with using it. So, as a software developer, I want to continually get better at what I'm doing. So, I think that's an important ingredient to making software development interesting, or web development. So this is sort of a backdrop to some of the thinking going on here, and some of the challenges I think that we are facing at Civic Actions. We had some old sites, getting some new stuff. We want to use current technology and some new things that are happening at the same time as maintaining some old sites, maybe even in Drupal 6. So there's, I tried to actually capture the motivation behind how we're now using Drupal, how we're using Docker and my Bowline project to achieve hopefully a better developer experience. So I wrote here, we desire a consistent system that provides rapid sandbox setup with flexibility for old and new Drupal projects and can contain site-specific infrastructure. And in sort of a tagging along, we also want to use that on our test servers, on our continuous integration servers, to run Behat tests or whatever. So all of that to say, to sort of describe the problem of what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to make our developers love their jobs. We want, teams to get up and running quickly and to have things work. And we can start looking at what's available. Vagrant is a very common, very worthwhile solution for this, actually. You can get Docker up and running. Sorry, has everybody heard of Vagrant? It's a virtual machine system for, defining virtual machines. And we also looked at Docker. Has everybody heard of Docker? Docker is, I think almost everybody's hand went up. Docker is also a virtualization system, but it has some very significant differences from a virtual machine. It's more of a virtual environment, and it's very much more lightweight. The performance gains can be significant. I think I could probably describe Docker a little bit more, but I want to kind of get going. Essentially, we chose to go with Docker and explore that as a solution. So, introducing Bowline. I came up with the Bowline title because it sort of sounds a little bit nautical, at least to me. I used to go sailing a little bit. And it kind of ties everything together. Thank you. So yeah, Bowline is a set of simple tools focused on using a Docker setup and collating all the project things. It's actually written in Bash, so if you're familiar with the web stuff, you're probably working in Drupal, you're working with PHP, but I've actually been living and writing Bash scripts a lot lately. One of the main goals for the project is to minimize requirements. And I think I have it now where you basically just need Docker and Fig, which I'll get to in a bit. And you can actually put almost all the tools that you need inside of Docker containers, including things like Drush, Composer, and so on. And some of these things you want to get the right versions to match the projects. Another objective is hackability, just to be able to take the scripts and make it do what you want very easily. And finally, a goal is that we want to have, our developers choose their own sort of tools and their own editors, their own operating system. About half of our developers at Civic Actions use Macs. So we wanted something that will just kind of work seamlessly with what people are already using, and we achieved that. There was a big, I think a big success of Bowline is actually that it solves the file permission issues that you can sometimes run into with virtual machines. You have Apache running and you upload files, and then those files are owned by Apache, then you want to maybe get rid of them, or all of a sudden you have file permission errors. Bowline solves that because it forces Apache that's running in the Docker container to run with the same user ID as your user. So if I'm running as Dave, Apache is running as Dave, which is great for development. All right, so how do we use Bowline? Well, you can find the README file if you go to GitHub and find the project. And what you do is so in the bash prompt, you do this command .bin activate, and here's a bit of the code that's going on. But this will change your bash prompt. It will add some commands and so on, but basically what it's doing here is, activating Bowline. And after it does that, you can run the Bowline command, which has been added to your path automatically. It will list for you the available commands. Now this is really important to understand what's going on. I'm going to do a demo in a minute anyway, but I just really want to highlight this because when you activate Bowline, you have an additional set of commands, and these commands override existing commands that you might already have, significantly Drush or Composer. So if you have Drush with site aliases and so on, what this is doing is actually overriding that and running Drush here now in your activated shell will run Drush inside of a Docker container. All right. demo. Just to give the URL for the project, it's github.com/Dave Numan/Bowline. Sorry, and that's Numan. If you find the README file in the project, it goes over installing Bowline for both existing Drupal sites and brand new ones, because the idea is that it will work with old and new. By the way, we're currently using this code on a few projects, one of them being a Drupal 6 site, actually a Drupal 6 to 7 migration. So we have 2 projects running on the same client, and it's going to be a migration. And there's a few others, both Drupal 6 and 7 that we have this. And I also have it working with Drupal 8 up to the top here. So I'm going to run the activate command. And as you can see, that actually adds a little thing to my command line. But it adds Bowline because that's the directory name that I'm in. If I'm in some other foo bar or whatever, it would be the name of the directory because that's the project name, right? So now we run Bowline and it shows those are the available extra commands that we have. Have I already mentioned Fig? I don't think I covered that, but that's, I should point out that there are 2 requirements for Bowline to work right now, and it's Docker and Fig. Fig is actually going to be replaced with something called Docker Compose, which has been released, but I don't know if it's quite available widely yet. So Docker Compose basically does the same things that Fig does, so that Fig will work just fine. And Fig is just basically a configuration management thing for Docker, and it uses YAML syntax, which is great for Drupal 8 users because all configuration seems to be going to YAML. So a Fig command is Fig PS will show the processes running for that project. All those simple lookup errors are specific to my version of Linux, and you can ignore that. I don't know what they can't figure out how to fix that. But this here shows that we currently have running a database container and a web container, which is running the LAMP, Apache, and PHP. Now, when I run this, the first thing you do when you set up Bowline is you will run a build command, and that goes off the screen. And what that will do is read from the default Fig. It'll build the Docker containers. And when that's done, then you run Bowline again, and it will have this IP address there, 172.17.04. Every time you stop and restart a Docker container, it grabs a new IP address. This is frustrating because, well, as a developer, you just want to pull up your local. I'll open that up. So this is Drupal 7 running in Docker. But I recently added a command called invoke proxy, and what that will do is start up. You can't see it here. There we go. That will start up at the top there. It starts up 2 more containers called proxy DNS mask and proxy nginx. And that runs as just a thin nginx layer for nicer addresses. And as you can see, we now have an additional address called bowline.localtest.me, and that is the URL that goes to localhost, and we can pull that up, and it's the same site. And that, of course, takes. So you can have as many of these as your system can handle. Of and Docker is very efficient at running multiple similar things. So you could probably run like 20 different projects simultaneously, and they'll each have their own project name .localtest.me. So earlier I said like one of the motivations is rapid context or smoother context switching. Well, here you go. You can quite easily do that. All right. Now some of those other commands there. Yeah, I don't think I want to go through all of them. But I'm just going to go over maybe some more familiar ones. So here's drush. You run drush status, and this is running drush inside of the Docker container. But I'm not, like, I don't have to SSH in, I don't need to enter the container, I just run drush, and everything is taken care of just with the, with the Bowline scripts. So I can, whatever it is, drush, clear all, drush ULI. The nice thing with drush, with the drush command, it also checks if the proxy is running, and because it, okay, that's not on the screen yet. Yeah.
So when you ran Activate, you already had those containers created previously, right?
I did, yeah.
So it didn't create those containers. You already had Drupal installed.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure that it wasn't that.
Yeah, Activate doesn't do a lot.
Okay.
It kind of makes everything available on your current bash environment. So if I log out, boom, it's gone. Then I go back in and I have to reactivate. It's just the bash session.
Fig is like cancel.
No,
Where it actually builds the containers based on like a manifest.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fig is more than just configuration. Fig will read a configuration file and it will build. So Bowline ships with a Fig file that it will read, and it will create the MySQL container and the Apache container.
Will it install Drupal as well, or are you still?
Right. There's another command that will install Drupal. I can. Let me just see what I have in this directory. All right. So I changed to a different directory, demo my project, and then I have this big red thing saying Bowline. So I'm like, oh, I'm in a different thing. So I'm going to deactivate. That goes away, and now I'm going to activate over here. Now it says my project, right? So now I'm in. Okay, perfect. This is. I have a feeling this is outdated code, but we're going to see what's going to happen. Okay, there's a command called settings init, and what that will do is, within your project, it's already initialized. So it's kind of running off the screen there. There's doc root. So Drupal is located in the doc root folder. It's fairly common setup, I think, in like Acquia and Pantheon hosting. Yes. Some people put things in htdocs or something, but the doc root folder is fairly baked into Bowline. So if you do want to hold Drupal in a different folder, create a symlink or something, because it's in the Apache configuration and so on. Okay. So actually, I can maybe just look at the settings in that file briefly. This is a bash script, and it will do a bunch of things. And I'm just thinking if I should run through the whole thing right now, but maybe not. It will check if you have Drupal installed. If you don't, it will ask you if you want to install it. And you can even choose to install Drupal 7 or 8. Unfortunately, that goes off the screen here, so I gotta figure that out. There, see? That's the prompt, and it says, would you like to install Drupal? Now, if you're doing an existing project, which is very likely the case, then you'll already have your doc root will have like your whole Drupal project. What it will do is add just a little bit of configuration that checks if a file exists, named settings.docker.php. If it doesn't exist, it will include that at the end of settings.php. So it's kind of on the screen there, but there's more on my screen here. You get the idea, I think. What that does is exit. So if you have an existing project, it'll just add the settings so that when it's local in your Docker development world, it will know how to find the MySQL container and connect to it properly. So, there's other helpful commands like backup, import, fixed perms, but I think you shouldn't need to run that. The file permissions are always right. That is what it looks like when you have an empty database. Now, another thing that you might typically want to do in your project is run tests. Something I just added a few days ago to the Bowline project that has sort of been in the works in our existing projects. We want to run bhat tests. All right, so I added a new command called hoist. That's another, playing on the sailing thing. And the idea is that you're bringing in some new feature into your project. Currently, I have 2 riggings. I don't want to go too much into sailing metaphors, so I think this is as far as I'm going to go. But I think it makes sense. So these riggings live in riggings, and I currently have 2. One is bhat, and one is Drupal core dev. So if you actually clone this repo, and then you do hoist Drupal core dev, it will automatically get cloned Drupal 8, and you'll have a development environment ready to go with Drupal 8. But right now I'm going to show you hoist bhat. And what that will do, this is why I needed a network connection. This will run a composer command installing bhat, and it will add a new command to the bin directory called bhat. It's taking a while. I'm trying to think if it will do anything else. Oh, I didn't mention there's also a run command. So the run command is essentially the thing you want your developers to run a lot, because it will run the tests, or in a project that we're working on, it runs migration, and especially our continuous integration servers run the run command. So this hoist bhat, it does the following things. It installs some default tests. It installs the bhat script in bhat, and it installs bhat step in the run script. And I ran this earlier today, so I'm just going to look into the run script here. And it probably added it twice, so I'm going to delete the extra one. Okay. So that the bottom 2 lines there were just added by that hoist command that I ran. So I'm going to show you what the run command does. Run is the last one listed up there. Okay, that was pretty fast. just runs drush status so that you know, hey, it's connected. What Drupal version? That's helpful, like if you're running Jenkins and you run this run command, it's like, okay, we got drush, at least it's working. And then here we have it, it's actually running this default out-of-the-box test, bhat test, and it says, given I'm on the home page, then I should see the text powered by Drupal. Pretty simple out-of-the-box bhat test. All right, and the idea is hackability, I mentioned earlier. So if I look at the, well, I'm going to look at the drush command, because I think most of us are somewhat familiar with drush. These are basically the lines in your bash script if you want to like start hacking your own scripts that make use of the system. You need these 3 lines and that's it. Then you can start this. Just make sure that everything is running. This command here, whoops, that I deleted. It checks if the proxy is running. You might not even need that depending on what you're doing. And then this command here is the Docker command that will run drush. Just checking the time. Do people want me to kind of go through this command? Because it's a good example of Docker usage.
Sure.
Yep. Docker exec. Is this big enough for people in the back? I could probably increase that. It goes off the screen again. There. Sorry. There we go. So this is all one line. Docker exec, I think, was added in Docker 1.3, but it's a really important command. They didn't have it before that, but it will run a command inside of an already running container. Before that, you had to always start a new container to run a command. So this is very helpful. The I and the T aren't that important, but it makes it interactive and it creates a virtual terminal when it connects. So this variable here, web, that's a Bowline thing. That is that's made available from up at the top when we're including the library Bowline file. And that specifies the container name, which in this case you can, well, anyway, it would be Bowline_web. Then the command that we're running is, we're actually going to run sudo -iu, and then the Apache username, www-data. So we're going to make sure that we're running drush as the right user. And this is the drush command because drush was installed via Composer. And we have to specify the root. And the root is actually var w.root. That is because like that's not the directory that the project is in, but that's the directory that it's mounted in the inside of the container. Did that make sense? Cool. And then we're adding the URI flag to drush. And then whatever the arguments are, this here says, in case you're not familiar with bash, the @ is just everything beyond the command line. So when I run, here I'll reactivate here. When I run drush st, that st will be placed inside of these hooks. You can also run, I guess I run Drush SQLC a lot, which will get me connected to my MySQL chain. Yeah, as far as I know, every Drush command that I've needed to use has worked. So let's see. I guess another, like, I might have glossed over a lot of Docker things. Docker has a lot of functionality, and if you do want to try out Bowline, I recommend that you start diving into Docker as well. Docker PS will show you the containers that are running. It really doesn't show up well on this large font situation, but yeah, so basically Bowline is scripts that is facilitating these Docker commands. But I recommend also just learning what some of these commands do. All right. As I said earlier, it does work with Drupal 8. The one caveat is to make sure you have the right version of Drush if you're going to be using Drush. So you run the compose require Drush dev latest or whatever it is. All right, I already talked about that. Yeah, that's kind of going off the screen, but that slide is just to say that we are also using this system with migration. It's once you kind of get used to how it's working, it's easy to add new things. I remember at least a month ago now, there was a requirement to get Solar Search working on our project. Like, well, why don't we add that to our development Docker stuff as well? And it was super easy. All I had to do was search out. Somebody made a pretty good Apache Solar container, Docker image, and I could just add it to our configuration, and away we go, and configure Drupal to see the Solar server. And that project has 3 containers when you run it, because it has Apache, MySQL, and Solar. So those kinds of things feel like easy wins. Like it just took a couple of hours to do that. Once you have this up and running. Also for migration, it's easy to kind of get things set up for you can have multiple databases easily. We have a migration in the works where we have 2 containers, 2 MySQL containers, and one has the legacy database and one is the new one that we're migrating to. So Drupal 6 to 7 migration. But then you could also set up Docker containers for migrating from anything. So, all right. There's this is my second last slide, almost done. Some remaining issues with the project. Performance and boot to Docker. Boot to Docker is the Mac version to get Docker working in Mac and Windows. And what it does, it actually runs a very small streamlined Linux inside of VirtualBox. And inside of that virtual machine is running Docker. So there's that extra layer, and that can cause some issues, primarily performance, but sometimes some networking issues as well. So we're working on that. Well, the Docker community is working on solving that as well, and there is some recent gains there. And beyond that, I think the current tool set that comes out of the box is a bit incomplete. I hope to add more common tools that are used in Drupal development, such as, it escapes me right now, the CSS compiler stuff, Compass and Sass, and maybe some other commonly used tools to have them ready to go. Yeah. Any questions?
version of Linux is then running on the containers?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, he asked what version are the containers running. They're running Debian Wheezy, I believe. But I actually have two versions because if you're running, like, if you're working on an old legacy site, I have one, that might be on an older Debian. But if you need like PHP 5.3, I have a Docker image ready to go for that. If you want the latest, well, not quite the latest, it's 5.4, PHP 5.4. And the MySQL container is running 5.5. But it's very trivial to edit those if you want to play with different ones. I would also like to get Nginx running in this. I just haven't had time to try it. I think it should work fine. Yes?
What are the main benefits to running every site in its own container versus using the containers to have kind of a standard platform that you can have multiple sites in?
Right. Yeah, so the question is why have a set of containers for each project instead of running, or did I hear that wrong?
The impression I got was you have a Docker container per site.
Yes.
Yeah. And so doesn't that add a fair bit of overhead when it comes to doing updates and managing everything?
Right. Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, we're not using Docker on our hosting at this point. Some people do, and Docker is hugely popular, and Amazon has Docker stuff ready to go. We're not doing that. So on our hosting environment, like our public stuff, we're doing a more traditional setup. But the thing is, we have multiple different hosting things. So yeah, I think it does make sense to package sort of the infrastructure with the project, especially for legacy sites that you're working on. You need older versions of things, even older versions, well, older versions of PHP, but maybe some other things that are peculiar to your project.
Right, so you're spinning up a dev sandbox that sort of exactly matches the production environment.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. In addition to that, I mean, you can achieve that same thing with Vagrant or with VirtualBox or with any virtualization thing. Docker is especially more efficient at running similar images and similar containers at the same time. So if you want to run a dozen virtual machines, like traditional virtual machines using Vagrant, that's going to take a lot more than if you want to run a dozen containers in Docker. I need to learn the insides of this a little bit better to explain it, but it just uses the file system in a really efficient way for things that are the same. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a version control or configs for containers. That's one way that you can keep your other development in sync. I believe one of our guys is
Sorry?
keeping your configuration of your environment in version control.
Yes.
I believe that is possible, and I think if you together we were.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so.
Which makes it easy to make sure that everyone has the same environment that they're working on. So if we have a team of 3 developers, they're each running different environments. Then we have internal problems as well, production problems, internal issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think with this, we can just version control the environment to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, exactly. So the comment was having your configuration of your environment in version control in Git. You should be using Git. I'm just going to show you the fig file. So sometimes you even run into problems with the wrong MySQL version. So here it is, MySQL 5.5. So everybody on your team, you just set this to match whatever your production is. And if you're using a newer version or whatever, also, like the web image, out of the box it comes with this one, which is running PHP 5.4. If you get to know Docker a bit, it's pretty simple to take something like that and build your own image. You can also, in this configuration, you can specify a Docker build. Yeah, so the point being, you just include all of that infrastructure configuration into your Git repository for the project. Anything else? I think I went a little over my time that I was hoping for.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, Dave.